This is Pharma 4, brought to you by Pharmaceutical Executive and Applied Clinical Trials. Pharma 4 is brought to you by Clinical Trials in Latin America and the 15th Annual Registries and Post-Approval Studies Congress. This week on Pharma 4, the Supreme Court upholds most of the Affordable Care Act, and GlaxoSmithKline plays out a record $3 billion for past marketing violations. Much of the healthcare industry breathed an audible sigh of relief last week when the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the majority of the Affordable Care Act. The ruling left intact the individual mandate, but did allow states to ignore the law's requirement to expand Medicaid. The ruling all but assures that the healthcare reform will remain at the center of the political debate going into November's election, but also ensures that the pool of insured Americans will expand significantly, if not universally. I talked earlier with Tom Norton, principal at NHD Smart Communications and former Pfizer VP of Public Affairs, and Cyril, VP of Government Affairs, about the historic ruling.
Well, Reed, I would have to say, again, I'm not an attorney, so I'll caveat my views on this. But from the standpoint of policy and government relations, which I followed very closely now, really since the 80s, the call last Thursday, in my mind, was probably the most significant healthcare, certainly significant healthcare decision we'll ever see from the Supreme Court. The threads of that decision, I am sure, will be with us for decades. If you just consider how carefully balanced this whole thing appears to have ended up, as far as we now have the law, there's no quibbling about that. It is to proceed. But we also have this very interesting section that more and more people are starting to churn over now, in terms of the fact that the states no longer will be held hostage to the healthcare reform law. That is, they have a lot of leeway whether to accept a lot of the money that's tied up in this law, as far as taking on the new Medicaid patients that the law had previously obligated them to accept.
Is there still a great deal to be determined over the next, certainly going into the election and even, in the year after that?
That's a great question. I think from an administrative standpoint, as far as the rules that are existent today, it clarified a lot. I've said that the mass of new bureaucracy and the implications of all of that in terms of the rules that are set in place, take ACOs as an example, all of that is now very clearly moving forward, which has huge implications for just enormous parts of the healthcare industry. On the other hand, what is not clear is, as we said just a moment ago, is this whole issue with Medicaid. I have said many times to people, what a lot of people really don't appreciate is how the states are really going to be the pedestal on which this thing stands.
Supreme Court wasn't the only healthcare news over the past week. GlaxoSmithKline has agreed to plead guilty and pay $3 billion to resolve criminal and civil liability resulting from unlawful promotion of certain drugs, failure to report safety data, and alleged false price reporting practices.
This action constitutes the largest health care settlement in United States history. It underscores our robust commitment to protecting the American people from the scourge of health care fraud, and it provides the effectiveness of strong relationships that we've forged with our partners to help ensure the health and safety of the American people.
GlaxoSmithKline CEO, Sir Andrew Whitty, said, "Today brings to resolution difficult, long-standing matters for GSK. Whilst these originated in a different era for the company, they cannot and will not be ignored. On behalf of GSK, I want to express our regret and reiterate that we have learned from the mistakes that have been made." For Pharma 4, this is Reed Paul. For more on these stories and other video exclusives, visit us at pharmaexec.com and appliedclinicaltrialsonline.com.